This is the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Your hosts are Seth Jacobson and Patrick Heiler.
Chapter 54, Into the Stone, and our symbol is the dice. No need for explanation. The rooftops up tier were no place for a sensible man to be in the night, Matt decided as he peered into the moon shadows. A little more than 50 paces of broad street, or perhaps narrow plaza, separated the stone from his tiled roof. Itself, 3 stories above the paving stones. But when was I ever sensible? The only people I ever met who were sensible all the time were so boring that watching them could put you to sleep. Whether the thing was a street or a plaza, he had followed it all the way around the stone since nightfall. The only place it did not go was on the riverside, where the Aranon ran right along the foot of the fortress, and nothing interrupted it except the city wall. That wall was only 2 houses to his right. So far, the top of the wall seemed the best path to the stone, but not one he would be overjoyed to take. Picking up his quarterstaff in a small, wire-handled tin box, he moved carefully to a brick chimney a little nearer the wall. The roll of fireworks, what had been a roll of fireworks before he had worked on it back in his room, shifted on his back. It was more of a bundle now, all jammed together as tight as he could make it, but still too big for carrying around rooftops in the dark. Earlier, a slip of his foot because of the thing had sent a roof tile skittering over the edge, and roused the man sleeping in a room below to bellow, "Thief!" and sent him running. He hitched the bundle back into position without thinking about it, and crouched in the shadows of the chimney. After a moment, he set the tin box down. The wire handle was beginning to grow uncomfortably warm.
Which is there for lighting the fireworks, because he doesn't have anything as convenient as a lighter or a match.
Yeah, I've heard this called a couple of different things.
Tinderbox? That's sort of what I think of. But a tinderbox has, like, tinder in it.
Yes, but...
And a flint and steel, rather than, like, a hot box full of, like, a coal and sand.
Yeah, there may be another word for this, but it's a little kit for starting fires. But what Matt has is a little box full of sand with a burning coal buried in it. So basically, it should stay hot enough for many hours to light something with it.
Yeah, and you're trying to keep a lot of oxygen from getting in there to slow the burn rate. It's a banked coal. I've never had any luck with doing that sort of thing. It always just goes out. I feel like you'd need a lot of coals.
I'm trying to find the appropriate word.
Like, it wouldn't last very long, you know?
The coal?
Yeah.
You could make it last a while, but yeah, not that long. An hour?
I mean,
maybe
like
2?
A bed of coals, sure. But like one single coal? How big is this thing?
Doesn't say.
This is old school medieval technology I know nothing about.
I mean, this was used up until the Civil War. People still use this stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I guess this is pulled from reality. It's not like this is a fantasy thing that's being made up. People used to do this with coals all the time.
Oh, yeah. It's a real thing. I've read about it in history over and over.
Pre-match, this is how you were able to light things quickly. Like light a candle with a coal in a box.
Yeah, with a bit of the last fire. Otherwise, you get a bow drill or a flint and steel, which is a bitch, let me tell you. I've only ever done it to try. It's like so painful to start a fire that way that I know there are people out there that can do it easily, but...
With a flint and steel or with a bow?
Either one.
Have you done both?
Yes.
Which was easier?
The flint and steel. For me, anyway. But there's like a technique to the bow drill that I did not have. And I'm sure there is to the flint and steel as well, but...
Have you seen the guy who does primitive technology on YouTube?
The guy?
Yes.
I follow a bunch of subreddits and stuff that...
Search primitive technology on YouTube. He comes up. It's totally wordless. He doesn't say anything, but he just basically builds primitive technology on a chunk. It's his land, but he has like a piece of forest, and he builds up like huts and furnaces and makes pottery and
there's
a windmill, and like it's so good. It's so good to watch. But it's totally zen, because all you hear is like the crickets chirping in the background and like him hitting things or whatever noises he makes while he's making the stuff.
Matt's standing on a rooftop looking up at the wall and realizing he'll be 100 paces up when the first place where he'll be able to stand straight if he climbs it, which is his goal.
Yeah, that's a lot of climbing.
That's terrifying. That's 300 feet.
That's what the Aiel do.
Or maybe a little bit less. 250 feet.
Aiel and Rand both make that climb.
So he's staring up at it thinking, like, you'd have to be a fool to try to do this, but he's going to try to do it. Suddenly he blinked, and he squinted at the side of the stone. There was some fool climbing it, just visible, as a moving shadow in the moonlight, and over halfway up already, with a drop of 70 paces to the pavement under his feet. Fool, is he? Well, I'm as big a one, because I'm going up too. Burn me, he'll probably raise an alarm in there and get me caught. He cannot see the climber anymore. Who in the light is he? What does it matter who he is? Burn me, but this is a bloody way to win a wager. I'm going to want a kiss from all of them, even Nynaeve.
Good luck with that. So that climber is Rand.
Yeah?
Absolutely, that's Rand.
I suspected it might be, but...
Because all the Aiel is together, and they haven't gone in yet.
Mm-hmm. Well...
And who else could it be? Like, I'm just trying to think, like...
We see a small group of Aiel here, but I don't know about all.
I mean, Matt sees them climb in as a group. He's like, oh, he sees the 100 Aiel go climbing. And this guy's going in by himself. Why would an Aiel go climbing by themselves when they're part of a group? They wouldn't.
Sure. I don't... But, I mean, Matt sees a group of, like, what, half a dozen?
That's who he encounters.
Right. I suspected it was Rand, but there are definitely Aiel out there.
Later on in this chapter, he glanced towards the city wall and stared. Shadows float along it, dim shapes trotting. Aiel, he was sure. There must have been over 100. They vanished, but now he could make shadows moving on the cliff face that was on. So then he sees them climbing. So he sees 100 of them. That's later. He sees about 100 Aiel
climbing
up all at once. So this lone figure, I would assume, is not part of the Aiel. And the only other person who we know who is climbing into the stone at this point is Rand. And that's sort of the theme of the last couple of chapters, is Rand and Perrin and Nynaeve and Egwene all see Rand out of the corner of their eye and turn and go, oh, who was that tall redheaded dude with the flute case on his back?
And then whoever it was gone.
And then he's gone. So we've been tracking Rand just by his secondhand appearances for all the other characters. And this is one of them.
I dig it.
It goes back to the, why did Matt look at the door during the game? Rand was out there.
Probably.
It's all these secondhand Rand sightings.
Secondhand Rands.
Secondhand Rand.
Matt shifted to peer toward the wall, trying to choose his spot to climb, and suddenly there was steel across his throat. Without thinking, he knocked it away and swept the man's feet out from under him with his staff. Someone else kicked his own feet away, and he fell almost on top of the man he had knocked down. He rolled off onto the roof tiles, loosing the bundle of fireworks. If that falls into the street, I'll break their necks. Staff whirling, he felt it strike flesh, and a second time, heard grunts. Then there were 2 blades at his throat. He froze, arms outflung. The points of short spears, dull so hardly they caught the faint light of the moon at all, pressed into his flesh, just short of bringing blood. His eyes followed them, to the faces of whoever was holding them, but their heads were shrouded, their faces veiled in black, except for their eyes, staring at him.
Takes him way too long to figure out they are Aiel. Black-veiled Aiel. He just doesn't expect to see Aiel in the city.
Sure, well, who would?
Nobody. And those 2 people are, I think, Avienda and Ruark? Or is Gaul in? It's Avienda,
Gaul is
Ruark.
also there.
Yeah, I'm just not sure which of the 2 that actually have the spears at his throat right here. I think one of them's definitely Avienda. You dance well for one caught by surprise, a young woman's voice said.
And we see later... Yeah, I have that highlighted too, that she is just a little shorter than Matt, and everybody else is taller than him, he observes. Well, I mean, that doesn't help us much, but it probably is Avienda. It's Avienda, Gaul, Ruark, and there's a couple other people there.
And we know that Avienda, Ruark were together in a group, and Gaul was in another group. So those 2 groups have come together here in Tyr. He thinks to himself, time to toss the dice. For a chilling moment, he thought the words in his head had been strange. So he says that in his head in the old tongue.
When he tries to pick up the staff again.
More proof that he's thinking in the old tongue and before he gets the memories. This is the old blood affecting him.
Yeah. He realizes later also that he had said Aiel out loud when he figured out who they were, but didn't know it was at first.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Matt gives them a couple of quips, but... After probably Avienda compliments him, they pull him to his feet and take the spears away from his throat.
Here's the first inclination that perhaps dancing is not what you think. Maybe that word doesn't mean what you think it means.
What do you do here? The man's voice asked. With the veils, Matt was not entirely sure which one had spoken. The voice sounded older, confident, used to command. He thought he could pick out the woman, at least. She was the only one shorter than he, and that not by much. The others all stood a head taller than he or more. Bloody Aiel, he thought. We have watched you for some little time, the older man went on. Watched you watch the stone. You have studied it from every side. Why? I could ask the same of all of you, another voice said. Matt was the only one who gave a start, as a man in baggy breeches stepped out from the shadows. The fellow appeared to be shoeless, for better footing on the tiles. I expected to find thieves, not Aiel, the man went on, but do not think your numbers frighten me. A slim staff, no taller than his head, made a blur and a hum as he whirled it. My name is Julian Sandar, and I am a thief-catcher. Not a thief-taker. I added that part.
Mm-hmm. And, of course, Matt immediately thinks to himself, a bloody thief-taker, getting it wrong right away.
And I would know why you were on the rooftops, staring at the stone. Matt shook his head. How many bloody people are on the roofs tonight?
All of them. And I'd just like to point out how, we've talked a little bit about how skilled Julian Sandar is, that he spotted the Aiel on the roofs, and now he's able to, I don't know if he snuck up on them. I mean, they knew where he was, but he was able to approach them. He was
It's
able
pretty
to
clear
spot
that
them, find them.
Matt was the only one that was surprised.
Exactly.
You stalk well, for a city man, the older man's voice said. But why do you follow us? We have stolen nothing. Why have you looked so often at the stone tonight yourself? Even in the moonlight, this Sandar's surprise was evident. The Aiel and Sandar were watching each other,
Totally.
and everyone was watching Matt. Matt wasn't watching anyone.
Matt was blundering along. He was watching the stone.
Yeah.
And, well, he was watching Rand.
Julian watched the Aiel watch Matt watch Rand.
Yes.
I'm going to read this again because it's even in the moonlight, Sandar's surprise was evident. He gave a start, opened his mouth, and closed it again, as 4 more Aiel rose out of the dimness behind him. With a sigh, he leaned on his slender staff. It seems I am caught myself, he muttered. It seems I must answer your questions. He peered toward the stone, then shook his head. I did a thing today that troubles me. He sounded almost as though he were talking to himself, trying to puzzle it out. Part of me says it was right what I did, that I must obey. Surely, it seemed right when I did it, but a small voice tells me I betrayed something. I'm certain this voice is wrong, and it is very small, but it will not stop. He stopped them himself, shaking his head again.
And that's Julian Sandar fighting the compulsion. That little voice in his head is resisting the compulsion.
Telling him that this wasn't your idea.
This wasn't right. It's against your code of honor. You need to make up for that.
Nodding. One of the Aiel nodded, and spoke with the older man's voice. I am Ruark, of the 9 Valleys Sept of the Tarad Aiel, and once I was Athendor, a red shield. Sometimes the red shields do as your thief-catchers do. I say this so that you will understand I know what it is you do, and the kind of man you must be. I mean no harm to you, Julian Sandar of the thief-catchers, nor to the people of your city, but you will not be suffered to raise the arm cry. If you will keep silence, you will live. If not, not.
I noticed that Ruark gets thief-catcher right.
Yes, of course, he understands the concept poorly. I noticed that he says, Julian Sandar of the thief-catchers.
I feel like that's just their need to have a formal title of
Yes.
the Sept and clan and
He's like
location.
fitting Julian into the Aiel way of greeting each other,
Totally.
and it's a little awkward.
Hi, I'm Seth Jacobson of the Watt Spoilers podcast.
You mean no harm to the city, Sandar said slowly. Why are you here, then? The stone. Ruark's tone made it plain that was all he meant to say. After a moment, Sandar nodded and muttered, I could almost wish you had the power to harm the stone, Ruark. I will hold my tongue. Ruark turned his veiled face to Matt. And you, nameless youngling? Will you tell me now why you watch the stone so closely?
No.
I just wanted to walk in the moonlight, Matt said lightly. The young woman put her spear point to his throat again. He tried not to swallow. Well, maybe I can tell them something of it. He must not let them know how he was shaken. If you let the other fellow know that, you lost whatever edge you might have. Very carefully, with 2 fingers, he moved her steel away from him. It seemed to him that she laughed softly. Some friends of mine are inside the stone, he said, trying to sound casual. Prisoners. I mean to bring them out. Alone, Nameless One? Ruark said. Well, there doesn't seem to be anyone else, Matt said dryly, unless you are here to help. You seem interested in the stone yourself. If you mean to go into it, perhaps we could go together. It is a tight roll of the dice any way you look at it, but my luck runs good. So far, anyway, he thinks. I've run into black-veiled Aiel, and they have not cut my throat. Luck cannot get much better than that. Burn me. It would not be bad to have a few Aiel along with me in there. You could do worse than betting on my luck. We are not here for prisoners, gambler, Ruark said. It is time, Ruark. Matt could not tell from which of the Aiel that came, but Ruark nodded. Yes, Gall. He looked from Matt to Sandar and back. Do not give the arm cry. He turned away, and in 2 steps he had blended into the night.
Of course, Ruark can just disappear. So, yeah, a couple of important points there.
Faster than Batman.
Right.
Every time I think of Ruark, I think of Batman. I don't know why.
No, I love it. Ruark is Batman.
Yeah.
I think there's not a more appropriate parallel.
Blended into the night.
Ruark calling him a gambler, which I kind of like.
Yeah.
It takes Ruark like 3 seconds to see into the heart of his personality.
Mm-hmm.
And we get Gall. So this is where we know that Gall, who was not part of this party and was rescued by Perrin,
mm-hmm.
is now part of the group. And that they all came together somehow. They must have met in Tyr. That's the only thing I can think.
Gall and Avienda were traveled together to Tyr.
No, Ruark and Avienda were traveling together.
Oh, it was Ruark?
Gall was by himself.
Gall was with Perrin. That's right.
Yeah.
The girls met Ruark and Avienda.
And once in Tyr, Gall runs into Bane and Sheod.
That's right.
They attach themselves to Fahiel, and Gall attaches himself to Perrin.
These friends of yours, Sandar said. They are 3 women? Matt frowned at him. What do you know of them? I know they are inside the stone, and I know a small gate near the river where a thief catcher can gain entrance with a prisoner to take him to the cells where they must be. If you trust me, gambler, I can take us that far. What happens after that is up to chance. Perhaps your luck will bring us out again alive. I have always been lucky, Matt said slowly.
I was curious if Matt's luck was just giving him multiple ways to get in. Whether it was like you could be a prisoner, or you could use the fireworks, or
follow the Aiel.
Follow the Aiel. Like, this is the choose your own adventure part, where it's like, flip to chapter 7 to use the fireworks. Flip to chapter 8 to go with the Aiel. Flip to chapter 9 to be taken prisoner. Yeah, he's definitely hesitant to go with him, because it's way too easy to become a fake prisoner to become a real prisoner. Especially with someone you just met.
Right.
Who's like a self-proclaimed lawman.
He does agree to do it.
He does.
Because he sees it as his only way in, but he's like, well, I may as well cause as much confusion on our way over there as I can, so that when we do actually break away and start to do things, it'll,
Right. Well, and he sees the 100 Aiel going in and says, well, they'll be one source of confusion, and I'll make another source of confusion, and then we should be able to sneak in.
We'll just stuff 25 pounds of explosives into this tiny window, and,
it'll make a flash, should make a really big noise. The thing with noise is actually like compression of gas, and if you make a big enough noise, that's actually an explosion. And when you stick an explosion inside a tiny little hallway and window, I'm surprised he didn't get shrapnel in his back from the broken stone.
He's lucky.
Yeah, well, yes.
Oh, I actually didn't mean to make that a pun.
That's exactly my point.
He is lucky that didn't happen. He manages to run a bit, and he does hit the ground, so that helps. Matt decides what to do, and then thinks that, I prepared this thing, it would be silly not to use it, so I might as well at least create a distraction with it.
Do we want to talk about arrow slots and how they're structured at all?
Yeah, sure. I'm trying to think of how to describe it without gesturing. So an arrow slit is not only a really thin window, but the edges are angled in such a way so that if you're shooting toward it, it's very unlikely that you'll be able to go through the slot. But if you're shooting out of it, you'll actually have a whole range of motion. So if you were facing it, its widest angle would be like perhaps the size of your body, and it angles in toward the outside of the wall, and then there's just a little slit. So when you're looking out of the slit, if you like lean all the way to your right, you can see far to the left. You can see almost 180 degrees, but from someone looking in from outside, all they can see is this little slot.
It's sort of like a funnel facing the inside. So the bottom of the funnel is the slit of the window, and then it opens up to the inside so you have access. It's a arrow funnel for funneling arrows into your opponents. And then that narrow part is obviously weaker and what crumbles with the explosion.
Very difficult to shoot in, very easy to shoot out.
Very standard on a lot of castles.
So when Matt stuffs that thing in there, it's actually the right shape to blow out, to blow stone out.
It funnels the force of the explosion towards Matt. Yeah,
Yes.
totally. Probably, I would imagine the only thing that saves him is the stone exploding in like a cone outwards, that there's very little exploding. Like maybe that narrow slit is what he's standing in. And so when it explodes, it goes like
away from
him at an angle above and to the sides. The forehead slapper in this one is when he cuts all the fuses short.
Well, some are longer than others, but he wants them all to go off at once, so he doesn't know what he's doing. He could have just added them to the end.
Totally. Just lit the longest one.
Yes, he could have used the whole length of the fuse rather than making the whole thing really short.
But it's just like Eludra's like, if you light one of these, run. And he's lighting the whole bundle on the shortest fuse.
So he cuts the fuses shorter and lights them all at once.
And then like turns and casually strolls away. I mean, he runs, but...
Quietly, he set down the tin box at his feet, balanced his quarterstaff across the wall against the side of the stone, and unslung the bundle from his back. Hurriedly, he wedged it into the slit, forcing it in as far as he could. He wanted as much of the noise to be inside as he could manage. Pulling aside a corner of the oiled cloth cover revealed knotted fuses. After a little thinking, back in his room, he had cut the longer fuses to match the shortest, using the pieces to help tie all the fuses together. It seemed they should go off all at once, and a bang and flash like that should be enough to pull everyone who was not completely deaf. The lid of the tin box was hot enough that he had to blow on his fingers twice before he could pry it off. He wished he had whatever Eludra's trick had been, lighting that lantern so easily, to expose the dark bit of charcoal inside, lying on a bed of sand. The wire handle came off to make tongs, and a little blowing on the hot coal had it glowing red again. He touched the hot coal to the knotted fuses, let tongs and coal fall over the side of the wall as the fuses hissed into flame, snatched up his quarterstaff, and darted back along the wall. This is crazy, he thought as he ran. I don't care how big of a bang it makes. I could break my fool neck doing that. The roar behind him was louder than anything he had ever heard in his life. A monstrous fist punched him in the back, knocking all the wind out of him even before he landed, sprawled onto his belly, on the wall top, which is 3 feet wide, I just want to interject. How lucky is that?
That he got blown straight forward rather even slightly to one side.
Even a little bit to one side.
Or that he rolled after he fell.
Definitely been dead.
Yeah.
You're not lucking your way out of a 100-foot fall, man.
Unless you have a body to land on.
Oh, I'm sorry, 100 paces. 100 paces, not 100 feet.
Right, that's more like 100 yards than 100 feet. So that's like 3 times the height.
Yeah.
How far, when he tossed the guy off White Bridge and fell on top of him?
I think that was like 3 or 4 stories.
That was like 30 paces or something like that, I feel
30
like.
paces, maybe?
Maybe. That's totally pulled out of the air.
Yeah, the Tarvalin Sky Bridge. I had it in my head that it was like a tallish building, like 40 feet. It might have been even more than that. I can't remember.
This seems to be quite a bit taller than that.
Yeah, definitely. For a moment, Matt just lay there, trying to make his lungs work again, trying not to think how he must have used up all his luck this time by not falling off the wall. His ears rang like all the bells in Tarvalin. Pushing himself up carefully, he looked back toward the stone. A cloud of smoke hung around the arrow slit. Behind the smoke, the shadowed shape of the arrow slit itself seemed different, larger. He did not understand how or why, but it did seem larger. He only thought for a moment. At one end of the wall, Sandar might be waiting, might be intending to take him into the stone as a pretend prisoner, or might be hurrying back with soldiers. At the other end of the wall, there might be a way inside without any chance of Sandar betraying him. He darted back the way he had just come, no longer worrying about the darkness or the drop to either side.
Yeah, just run right into the thing that you use to attract all the soldiers. Great
He has
idea,
that thought.
Matt.
He like jumps in and runs a couple of feet, and there's like a huge storm of soldiers coming down this hallway, and he's like, right, I did that.
Yep, that's why. Yep.
That was the whole point of me doing this.
Yeah. Crap. And he's about to go down until Jewel and Sandar, who must have just come running when he saw the explosion,
shows up. Yes.
Yeah.
Suddenly, Sandar was there beside him. In the light of the lanterns, dropped by men clawing for their swords, his slender staff whirling even faster than Matt's quarterstaff. Caught between two staffmen, taken by surprise, the soldiers went down like pins in a game of bowls.
I always like that image.
It makes sense. And in a little hallway, a large group of people isn't actually going to help. All they can do is block the retreat of the men in front.
Although I wonder how effective a staff is in these halls as well. They must be pretty wide halls.
It would have to be huge for one person using a quarterstaff.
But this is the Stone. I mean, it's a big palace with big halls. And
yeah, I imagine it's enormous.
Right.
I mean, I don't know. But we know the storm's enormous.
They talk about getting lost in there. And
like when you're coming to Tyr, you see the stone first.
It's a mountain.
Yeah. Sandar stared at the fallen men, shaking his head. Defenders of the stone. I have attacked defenders. They will have my head for... What was it that you just did, gambler? That flash of light and thunder, breaking stone. Did you call lightning? His voice fell to a whisper. Have I joined myself to a man who can channel? Fireworks, Matt said curtly.
I mean, I feel like this is the beginning of the seed of using fireworks in battle. It gets planted in Matt's head here. That like fireworks and channeling can kind of have the same effect.
Similar.
Yeah. You can make explosions. And then I feel like this gong that goes off here is one of those, like, it's a timeline syncer.
Yes.
Because, like, everyone can hear it, so you know that, like, when the gong goes off, everyone's, like, synced up at the same moment in terms of the storylines.
So in that moment, which is like a couple paragraphs back, because this is where we perspective switch to Rand.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, geez, I figured I would just read this, too, because all of Rand we get
It's like half a paragraph.
Yeah. The alarm gong sent echoes crashing through the stone, but Rand paid no more attention to them than he had to the roar that had come before, like muffled thunder from somewhere below. His side ached, the old wound burned, strained almost to tearing by the climb up the side of the fortress. He gave the pain no heed, either. A crooked smile was fixed on his face, a smile of anticipation and dread he could not have wiped away if he had wanted to. It was close now. What he had dreamed of. Kalendor. I will finish it at last. One way or another, it will be done with. The dreams, finished. The baiting, and the taunting, and the hunting. I'll finish it all. Laughing to himself, he hurried through the dark corridors of the Stone of Tyr. He's crazy.
He's absolutely going insane. I think the old wound in his side is burning because he's getting closer to corruption and Forsaken, to Bilal. Yep. He's absolutely, like, so stressed. He's, like, laughing in the middle of a battle. His dreams have driven him to the point of, and lack of sleep, I think, have driven him to the point of total insanity.
Yeah.
And I think there is an absolute effect of the taint.
Absolutely.
It's not all of it, but it's a contributing factor.
And we perspective switch to Egwene after that little bit about Rand.
Yeah, we're really getting to the point where in the story, the avalanche at the end, we are in the final battle of this book. And so we are getting multiple perspective switches in this chapter, whereas before we've mostly been seeing one, maybe two. Here we're getting Matt, Rand, Egwene, and then switch back to Matt. And that's all in one chapter. So we're all over the place here.
Mm-hmm. I have a couple of bits to read from Egwene's perspective, but I have nothing for, like, the first page. They're kind of waking up, realizing where they are, that they're bait, what the stuff Leandrin said is true.
Just that her dreams show what's going on. She's seeing, she's seeing Perrin in Tel Run-Riad as a wolf. She's seeing Matt saying, I'm coming, which is also what he's thinking. She seems Rand.
And literally saying out loud at one point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think the last thing he thinks to himself in the last scene is, I'm coming, Matt thought.
As he ran after the thief taker. I'll get you out or I'll die.
So she's seeing that in her dreams.
And as Egwene's waking up there, she touches her belt and realizes that her little pouch is still there with the 2 rings.
And they're being shielded by Amiko.
Yes.
And she is one of the two, these first two sisters, actually, Amiko and Joya, are the two that get taken prisoner and are later killed to prevent them from talking.
Oh, gotcha.
So the process of binding them here in Teleran Riyadh means they end up getting captured and can't flee with the other Black Ajah. And then eventually, I think Slayer ends up killing them in their cells. She was murdered by Slayer, who cut their throats and nailed their tongues to the cell door.
Nice.
Because they were, they were being questioned, and I believe Amiko is the one who tells them to go to Tanchico. And so they're able to foil the plan in Tanchico because of what Amiko tells them about the plans of the Black Ajah.
Mm-hmm.
So just a little bit of history about what she ends up doing in the future.
They did not take the Terangriel, Egwene says wonderingly. She fumbled it out of her pouch. It lay heavily on her palm, all stripes and flecks of color, a ring with only one edge. We were not even important enough to search, Elaine sighed. Egwene, are you certain Rand is coming here? I would much rather free myself than wait for the chance of him, but if there is anyone who can defeat Leandrin and the rest of them, it must be him. The Dragon Reborn is meant to wield Kalendor. He must be able to defeat them. Not if we pull him into a cage after us, Nynaeve muttered. Not if they have a trap set he does not see. Why are you staring at that ring, Egwene? Teleran Riyadh will not help us now. Not unless you can dream a way out of here. Perhaps I can, she said slowly. I could channel in Teleran Riyadh. Their shielding won't stop me reaching it. All I need to do is sleep, not channel. I am surely weary enough to sleep. Elaine frowned, wincing as it pulled her bruises. I will take any chance. But how can you channel even in a dream, cut off from a true source? And if you can, how can it help us here? I do not know, Elaine. Just because I am shielded here does not mean I am shielded in the world of dreams. It is at least worth a try.
So, this comes back to a long-running discussion
that has been going on in the Discord. There's no way to prove back or forth, but me and Seth are of the mind that channeling in the world of dreams is not channeling.
See, I don't know. This is the best evidence here, in my opinion. Because if you're shielded in the real world and go to sleep, it seems like you should remain shielded in the world of dreams, because it's the same connection to the true source. Your body cannot draw the one power. And so the only way to draw it would be if it was a totally different source, like something that you were able to picture in your head in the world of dreams.
Right. Because Teleran Riyadh is just a reflection of reality. It's not reality.
But at the same time, the way the dream works, what affects you in the dream affects you in the real world, but the reverse is not necessarily true. Right? Because like Elaine's beating, her bruises go away in the world of dreams.
To play devil's advocate and to fight Travis, or fight on Travis Sedai's side for just a second, even though I disagree with him, who's been the biggest proponent in Discord of this theory. If you cut your leg off in the real world and go to sleep and wake up in Teleran Riyadh, you'll have both legs.
Right.
So, yeah.
And so that makes sense that if you're shielded in the real world and you wake up in the dream,
there he is.
you won't be shielded anymore.
Right. So there's that as well. I just think nothing is real in the world of dreams, and everything is real. So it's not channeling in the same way that you would channel in the real world, just like running in your dreams is not running the running that it is in the real world. They're not the same. You're not in the same place. Although many disagree. Patrick says as he reads the feed coming in from Discord.
And so the definitive proof I think we've talked about before would be if a non-channeler was able to channel in Teleran Riyadh.
Would be the only way to prove.
Exactly.
Or disprove. And we never see that happen.
No.
And that's a good point, Travis. He's saying if you only have one leg, if you believe you have one leg, you will enter Teleran Riyadh with one leg, which that I agree with.
It depends on how much control you have. It's like, I mean, the wise ones certainly know that they're older, but they enter Teleran Riyadh all the time as young women.
That's true, but they're, masters of Teleran Riyadh.
Sure.
They know how to manipulate it. And Egwene doesn't. So I think that in this scene, if she believed that she would be shielded when she entered Teleran Riyadh. She would be.
I'm nodding.
But she enters thinking, I don't see how that would work. I don't see why that would be true. And so she goes in and she's not shielded because she doesn't believe that that makes any sense.
Yeah, I'm very much convinced that you could, if you thought you had a shield around you, you would create in Teleran Riyadh that shield.
Yes.
But I don't know that necessarily settles whether or not the channeling itself is real.
You would make it real with your mind.
Sure.
Morpheus said. Well, I'll move on.
Yeah,
but that's,
anyway,
yeah.
This is one of the central, when we've had that debate in the past, this particular scene is, if not the central argument point, one of the major, like, this one, Slayer, and it's just a weave with Perrin, I feel like are the three real things we can talk about in terms of like whether channeling is real or not.
The Slayer thing is that because before the Dark One changed Slayer wanted nothing more than to be able to channel. But the Dark One made him into a dreamer, or used two souls and combined them to make the man who Slayer was into a dreamer.
Yeah, Luke and Isam were the two people who were combined.
Right.
Luke wanted to channel. Isam just wanted power.
Okay.
That combination gave him the ability to do what he does with Teleran Riyadh in the same way that Perrin's combo of souls gives him that ability.
Well, what I'm getting at is that the argument with Slayer is that if you could make yourself channel in Teleran Riyadh, he would certainly be able to do it. So why hasn't he, if he wanted to be able to? I would say because why would you? If you can just manipulate reality around you with your mind, why would you learn how to channel?
Right. What you can do in Teleran Riyadh is just as, if not more powerful, as shown by Perrin.
And I know people disagree with me. I love you, Travis. I think that Perrin could channel if he wanted to in Teleran Riyadh. He just doesn't have to. He's better than a channeler.
He doesn't have to, and he doesn't, because he's never done it, he doesn't understand how channeling works, and without that understanding, he could never do it himself.
Sure.
I have not come down on either side of this argument. I have argued both sides of this one, and I can see it from both sides. I don't fully...
It's tough.
It's one of those things that is a little... It's more of a philosophical question than a practical one.
Yes.
In the same way, and I think I've used this before, is do we live in a virtual reality? Well, does it really matter?
Is there anything you can do about it?
There's nothing you can really do about it. It just, the effect is the same. The underlying reality may be one way, it may be the other, but until you can see a difference, it doesn't matter.
Exactly. You think that's air you're breathing right now, Neo? Casual shrug. Do you know? No, of course not.
I mean, it's hard not to talk about Teleran Riyadh without bringing up the Matrix.
Right. I mean, it's yes. The Matrix is a giant dream shard.
And I just like to make the point that the Matrix came out long after The Wheel of Time was a very, very popular book series.
Yeah, I think The Matrix came out in 99.
Mm-hmm. And at that point, I think Lord of Chaos was out, at least, if not beyond that. The other thing that was inspired by the ways and traveling was actually the Nether in Minecraft. So I know you don't know anything about this, but essentially what you're able to do is create a portal, go to another world, and you can travel at an 8-to-1 ratio. And that's inspired by the ways. That if you travel 8 meters in the Nether and then create another portal, that'll transport you 64 meters, 8 times is the distance. And so you can create a bunch of portals pretty close together, and they'll take you all over the world in the main world. It's such a cool... For those of us who enjoy the game Minecraft, and those of us who enjoy Wheel of Time, it's a really cool crossover.
Egwene goes to sleep. She wakes up.
In the world of dreams.
In her happy place. And then she transports herself to the Stone of Tyr.
After embracing the true source.
Mm-hmm.
The fake/real true source?
Question mark?
Something like the true source?
Hit us up on our social media. Tell us what you think. I would be interested in just reading responses and in a totally unscientific poll of WOT readers. What do you think? Is channeling in Teleran Riyadh, or do you just think you're channeling?
Spoilers@gmail.com.
Yes. The form of Joya Bayer. The form of Joya Beer. Going with beer.
I like
B-Y-I-R, Bayer. But there's another Bayar, so I don't...
That's true. that is child Bayar.
Yeah. Well, whatever. The form of Joya stood before Kalendor. Her shape was so insubstantial that the surging light of the sword shone through her. The crystal sword no longer merely glittered with refracted light. In pulses it glowed, as if some light inside it were being uncovered, then covered, and uncovered again. The Black Sister started with surprise and spun to face Egwene. How? You are shielded. Your dreaming is at an end.
Any idea what those pulses are?
I thought it might have something to do with the shining light of the ethereal light of Kalendor shining through the form of Joya, because she's only partly in Teleran Riyadh. Because she's using essentially a flawed Terangrial that doesn't allow her to fully enter.
Sure, the fact that you can see through her I get, but what are the pulses? That's not something they've ever seen before. My guess is Rand is getting close, and the sword is sensing that.
Pulsing in anticipation?
Totally.
Sounds like a bad line from a romance novel.
Quivering member.
Before the words were out of the woman's mouth, Egwene reached for Saidar again, wove the complicated flow of spirit as she remembered it being used against her, and cut Joya off from the source. The dark friend's eyes widened, those cruel eyes so incongruous in that beautiful, kindly face. But Egwene was already weaving air. The other woman's form might seem like mist, but the bonds held it. It seemed to Egwene that there was no effort involved in holding both flows in their weaving. There was sweat on Joya's forehead as she walked closer.
I said, sweating?
Joya threatens at the end of her tirade, "When I wake, I will take your Terangrial from you myself. Be careful what you do, lest I have reason to be angry when I come to your cell." Egwene smiled at her. "Are you certain you will wake, dark friend?"
And that's the arrogance of... they only have Terangrial that work when you can channel. So they just didn't even bother searching them, assuming that if they were shielded,
what are they going to do?
They're not going to be able to do anything, because the idea of having a Terangrial that lets you into Teleran Riyadh without channeling is not something they've encountered before.
Yeah.
It's their arrogance there. That's a hard thing to say. I did it well the first time. Terangrial that gets you into Teleran Riyadh. That's a lot
Teleran Riyadh, Terangrial.
Those are not real words.
Be careful what you do, lest I have reason to be angry when I come to your cell. Egwene smiled at her. "Are you certain you will wake, dark friend? If your Terangrial requires channeling, why did you not wake as soon as I shielded you? Perhaps you cannot wake so long as you are shielded here." Her smile faded away. The effort of smiling at this woman was more than she could bear. "A woman once showed me a scar she received in Teleran Riyadh, dark friend. What happens here is still real when you wake." The sweat rolled down the Black Sister's smooth, ageless face now. Egwene wondered if she thought she was about to die. She almost wished she were cruel enough to do that. Most of the unseen blows she had received had come from this woman, like a pounding of fists, for no more reason than that she had kept trying to crawl away. No reason more than that she had refused to give up. And then Egwene beats the hell out of her. But leaves her there.
I am very confused as to why shielding someone in the real world, in Teleran Riyadh, doesn't shield them in the real world. Because it would seem like what affects you in Teleran Riyadh affects you in the real world. We know, if you get a cut, that affects you in the real world. If you get shielded, I feel like that should affect you in the real world. That would have cut off the spirit, and then I feel like she should have just dropped right out of the world of dreams.
This is somehow trapping her in Teleran Riyadh.
But somehow it cuts off her shield, her flow of spirit, and then she can't get out.
And we're also talking about two people who basically don't know anything at all about how to use Teleran Riyadh.
No, they're completely there on the Terangrial.
So somebody tell me if I'm totally off base, but so it could be that Joya just has no idea what she's doing. Maybe she can leave.
That if she was a dreamer, she could just be like, yep, see ya, peace.
Yeah, it's just a weave, bro.
It's a good point.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. But it's the fact that what happens in the dream affects you in the real world. I feel like the second she got shielded in the dream, she should have been shielded in the real world, and that should have cut off the flow to the Terangrial, and that should have yanked her right out of the dream.
This is leading me back to a thought I was having before while we were talking about channeling in Teleran Riyadh. And, neither the dream nor channeling are like real physical things. I mean, channeling in the real world, I guess you could call it tangible, but it's not like made of matter. You know what I mean? Like it's not the same.
It's magic.
Yes, it's magic.
For me, the issue is that any individual theory falls down. I haven't been able to come up with a theory that fits all the individual facts.
Yeah.
It seems like if I go one way, I can find contradictions, and if I go the other way, I can find contradictions. And so it seems like channeling and Tel'aran'rhiod Riyadh mix in this weird way that I can't really pull apart when you're channeling into a Tel'aran'rhiod in the world of dreams, and then channeling, and then shielded, and then the whole thing is just really confusing to me.
I feel like Egwene at her highest level, if shielded in Tel'aran'rhiod Riyadh, well, not only would it not work, but she could make it disappear or just not channel.
Yeah,
it wouldn't really matter.
I could totally see her
open
just
a hole in the ground anyway.
Dismissing the shield as, well, that doesn't exist in the world of dreams anymore.
Yeah,
I'm not shielded.
You are not here.
But it does seem to be that, I don't know, channeling has some resistance. Well, no, it doesn't, because it's just a weave with Perrin.
Yeah.
I feel like the reason it has resistance is because the channelers believe that it's real.
Yeah, they're afraid of it.
Exactly. And that's why it blows Egwene's mind when Perrin says it's just a weave.
Egwene beats the hell out of Joya and then leaves her there shielded and tied up with air.
And this is a leveling up moment for Egwene. She goes up to 3 simultaneous flows. We've talked about before when she went up to 2. Mm-hmm. Now she's doing 3, and she's tying them off. So we're seeing a progression of parallel processing, parallel channeling. She's able to do multiple things at once.
Right. Making a disgusted sound, Egwene left her standing there, trapped and shielded, and hurried into the first forest of polished redstone columns. There had to be a way down, to the cells somewhere.
If Egwene was shielded in the real world and then went to sleep, she couldn't get rid of the real shield in the world of dreams. That wouldn't work.
No, but she can attack the person that is shielding her from the world of dreams.
Which she's about to do.
Yes. Quick-ish perspective switch to Perrin.
The first rescue of Fael.
The stone corridor fell silent as the final dying scream was cut off by young Bull's jaws closing on the two-leg's throat, crushing it. The blood was bitter on his tongue. He knew this was the Stone of Tyr, though he could not say how he knew. The 2 legs lying around him, one kicking his last with Hopper's teeth buried in his throat, had smelled rank with fear as they fought. They had smelled confused. He did not think they had known where they were. They certainly did not belong in the wolf dream, but they had been set to keep him from that tall door ahead, with its iron lock, to guard it at least. They had seemed startled to see wolves. He thought they had been startled at being there themselves.
I think these are guards teleported in the flesh into Tel'aran'rhiod Riyadh by Bilal.
I think that is likely.
He probably set this up in order to, because he's thinking he's trapped Moraine. And the best theory I've seen so far as to why Perrin has to rescue Fael multiple times is there are layers he has to go through before he can get to her. And this is the first layer, and Bilal set guards on the trap.
Yeah.
So that he could be sure that no one rescued Moraine in this critical time.
Either put men's actual bodies there, or he just put their minds there while they're asleep.
I believe it's their actual bodies.
Yeah, it makes more sense.
But I don't have proof one way or the other.
Yeah, that doesn't really matter.
They're dead either way.
He turns back into a man, and then Perrin pulled the hammer from his belt as he strode to the door. Fael must be here. One sharp blow shattered the lock. He kicked open the door. The room was empty except for a long stone block in the middle of the floor. Fael lay on the block as if sleeping, her black hair spread out like a fan, her body so wrapped in chains that it took him a moment to realize she was unclothed.
Kinky.
Every chain was held to the stone by a thick bolt. He was hardly aware of crossing the space until his hand touched her face, tracing her cheekbone with a finger. God, he loves those cheekbones.
She's got really, high cheekbones. Talks about that a lot. Very regal face. Very Falcon-like.
She opened her eyes and smiled up at him. I kept dreaming you would come, blacksmith. I will have you free in a moment, Fael. He raised his hammer, smashed one of the bolts as if it were wood. I was sure of it, Perrin. As his name faded from her tongue, she faded too. With a clatter, the chains dropped to the stone where she had been.
Do you think that was actually her? Like, do you think she remembers that after she's been rescued? Or do you think that was an image to distract from the trap?
I thought it was actually her.
I think in my head, I've always thought it was just red herring for Perrin as he was trying to rescue her.
Mm-hmm.
That it's only when he actually sees her in her true form, aka the Falcon, that he encounters the real Fail.
That's true.
But now rereading this, I'm thinking that maybe it is her, and he just has to get through the layers of the trap and rescue her multiple times. Yeah. So I'm torn on it.
Alarm gongs somewhere ahead sent sonorous clangs down the corridor, not quite drowning out the ring of metal on metal and the shouts of fighting men rather closer. Matt perspective switch.
So I guess, my question there is, does Fail remember every one of the rescues, or does she only remember the last one when he gets cut up by all the various Falcons and shredded?
Always thought she was actually there. It was just there are layers to the trap, but I have no reason for. That's just what I assumed.
Reading it now, I'm agreeing with you, but that's not what has been in my head all this time.
Yeah, it could just be an illusion.
You're right.
There's a little scene here. Matt and Sandar are fighting their way through the corridors, and Matt is stopped in his tracks by this High Lord Darlin.
And High Lord Darlin is a pretty significant character.
Yeah.
He's not just a minor lord. I've got his information pulled up here. He ends up being the leader of the rebels in Kyrien, and then Rand encounters him when he pretends to be Tom. As that's everyone's favorite name to use as a cover.
Yeah.
And he goes out there with Moraine and ends up fighting Padden Fane and gets the second cut on his side.
Gotcha.
And Darlin ends up actually carrying Rand to safety. That's this guy.
Yes.
And he ends up being
later
king.
Yes.
And he becomes king of Tyr. He becomes one of Rand's major supporters and takes command at Thakandar when Rodolactoralda is tricked. And so he becomes he works directly for Matt and follows his orders later, which I think is funny. Particularly ironic because he becomes one of the generals following Matt on the battlefield.
Oh, this is interesting. Min has two viewings about him. One is that he'll become king of Tyr, and the other is that he will marry Caroline de Madrid, one of Moraine's cousins. And he will die in bed. She'll live longer than him. Caroline de Madrid is not an important character in the series.
Well, only that she's Moraine's cousin.
Yes.
And they look a lot alike.
She initially opposes Rand al'Thor.
The de Mandred family doesn't have the best of reputations. They do a lot of things wrong. Moraine is actually a bit of the exception to that. De Mandred versus Damodred, they sound exactly the same to me.
I would say Demandred or Demadred.
Damodred versus Demandred.
That is actually, when I first read the series, I immediately saw all the, separate meanings Jordan uses. He places in people's names things. All the kinds of different things.
The way he did it with the Trolloc names.
Demandred. But yeah, the Trolloc names is a great example. Or the names of their clans. Myrddraal, Murder, they're everywhere. Ogier, Ogre, come on. But anyway.
Lanfear, Fear.
Matt eventually beats Best's
High Lord Darlin.
Best Darlin, cracks him in the head.
Darlin holds him off for 5 minutes. That's a long time in a battle.
Yeah.
It's a very long time in a battle. He's a skilled swordsman.
Matt's very frustrated by it.
Don't we learn later he's a sword master? Because he and Rand go to fight right before Mashadar shows up and Padden Fane shows up. They're starting to duel, and Darlin pulls out his sword and he's got a heron mark on it.
Good observation. I don't know, but if he's got a heron mark, well, it's likely that he's a blade master, considering his family and things. But also possibly, when you're that rich, you could have inherited a heron mark.
I always thought they got awarded to blade masters. I don't think you ever...
Some people do, but Lan didn't have to become a blade master to get his heron mark blade. Or a Rand.
Rand didn't. I thought Lan did. Well, you're right, because he got it. He was inherited.
He was a baby.
Right. You're right. Oh, that was Torom? Travis brings up a good point. Lan's blade isn't heron marked. It's power forged, but not Heron marked.
Not technically a Heron mark.
Right.
Well, I mean Power Forged.
Yeah, but it clearly lands a Blade Master.
Yes.
I mean, he kicks Blade Master's asses for breakfast, right? Like, he doesn't need the Heron mark blade, although he deserves one.
Sandar came to stand beside him, frowning at the crumpled High Lord. He does not look so mighty lying there, he said wonderingly. He does not look much greater than me. Matt gave a start and peered down the hall, where a man had just gone trotting across along a joining corridor. Burn me if I did not know it was crazy. I would swear that was Rand. Sandar, you find that... He began swinging his staff up onto his shoulder, and cut off when it thudded into something. Spinning, he found himself facing another half-dressed High Lord, this one with his sword on the floor, his knees buckling, and both hands to his head where Matt's staff has split his scalp. Hastily, Matt poked him hard in the stomach with the butt of the staff to bring his hands down, then gave him another thump on the head to put him down in a heap on top of his sword. Luck, Sandar, he muttered. You cannot beat bloody luck. Now, why don't you find this bloody private way the High Lords take down to the cells? Sandar had insisted there was such a stairway, and using it would avoid having to run through most of the stone. Matt did not think he liked men so eager to watch people put to the question that they wanted a quick route to the prisoners from their apartments. Just be glad you were so lucky, Sandar said unsteadily, or this one would have killed us both before we saw him. I know the door is here somewhere. Are you coming? Or do you mean to just wait for another High Lord to appear? Lead on. Matt stepped over the unconscious High Lord. I'm no bloody hero.
Yes, you are.
Trotting, he followed the thief catcher, who peered out the tall doors they passed, muttering that he knew it was here somewhere.
Did you catch that glimpse of Rand?
Yes.
Yeah.
I didn't even catch that when I read it through the first time.
Yeah, no, it's very subtle, but if I didn't know any better, I'd swear that was Rand. Because it is. It was. Yeah, absolutely it was. So, just repeating that series of Rand sightings that we get from all the other characters.
Thank you for listening to the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Rate us in the Apple Podcast app or support us on Patreon. Is that good enough?